Dear viewers, what would you do if someone asked you to put everything you've built on the line to help them? Today's story is about a young female police officer from Texas whose entire reality shifted when she got an impossible request from the other side of prison walls. This is more than just a story about bending rules or crossing lines. This is about a single choice that would challenge everything she stood for and reshape two lives in ways neither could ever foresee. Before we get into this incredible journey, I need you to know that what you're about to hear will test how you think about justice, integrity, and the power of one person's will to do what is right. If you're drawn to stories like this, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you will want to stick around until the very end, because this story has turns you will not see coming. Let's begin with Ava Ramirez, a 26-year-old officer who had built her entire career on following every rule, every protocol, every procedure with unwavering precision. She wasn't an officer who cut corners or turned a blind eye. Ava was different. Her colleagues respected her because she afforded everyone the same level of dignity, whether they were fellow cops, civilians, or even suspects in custody. She possessed a quiet composure that commanded attention whenever she spoke. Ava had always felt a calling for law enforcement. Growing up in a small Texas town, she idolized her older brother, a respected detective who served for over 20 years. He taught her that wearing a badge was about more than just authority. It was about being a shield for those who couldn't protect themselves. It meant being the line between chaos and order. And most critically, it meant your integrity was non-negotiable, no matter the cost. After graduating from the police academy at the top of her class, Ava's career began in a bustling Dallas precinct. She cut her teeth on the full gamut of rookie assignments: traffic stops, domestic disputes, theft cases. Her superiors quickly recognized her potential. She was thorough, professional, and possessed a rare gift for calming volatile situations. It wasn't long before other officers were specifically requesting to partner with her, knowing she was the kind of cop who always had their back. But Ava's strict adherence to the code sometimes put her at odds with the precinct's culture. If she witnessed misconduct from a fellow officer, she reported it. If she saw paperwork being fudged to save time, she spoke up. When leadership tried to nudge her toward handling cases a certain way, she refused to buckle. This garnered her a reputation for integrity, but it also painted a target on her back. The situation came to a head with her direct superior, Commander Thorne. A man in his 50s with 2 decades on the force, Thorne was a power player with deep connections and a history of getting his way. When he began making inappropriate advances, Ava shut them down politely but firmly. Thorne, unaccustomed to rejection, took it as a personal slight. He then began a systematic campaign to make her life miserable, saddling her with the worst shifts, the most dangerous assignments, and scrutinizing her reports with a magnifying glass. One evening, Thorne called her into his office. Under the guise of a professional review, the conversation turned personal. He made it abundantly clear that any hope for career advancement hinged on her becoming more accommodating. When Ava flatly refused and threatened to file a formal complaint, Thorne's demeanor turned icy. He smiled and warned her she was making a life-altering mistake. 2 weeks later, the threat materialized. Ava was handed transfer orders to a maximum security correctional facility 3 hours outside of Dallas. The official reason cited was personnel shortages, but Ava knew it was a thinly veiled punishment. Thorne had used his influence to exile her for her defiance. Rather than engage in a battle she couldn't win, Ava accepted the transfer with quiet dignity. She packed up her life and braced herself for a starkly different form of law enforcement. The correctional facility was another world. The moment she passed through the heavy steel doors, the atmosphere itself felt suffocating. The air hummed with a low-grade tension, the sounds were jarring and metallic, and a palpable sense of danger clung to every surface. This was no longer about serving the public. It was about containing chaos in a place where hope was a foreign currency. Ava's role shifted to supervising inmate activities, conducting escorts, and enforcing security protocols. She quickly adapted, realizing that a corrections officer needed a different kind of armor. Here, survival depended on reading subtle cues, understanding a complex social hierarchy, and maintaining authority without resorting to unnecessary force. The inmate population was a cross-section of brokenness and aggression. The perpetually angry, the hopelessly defeated, the cunning manipulators, and the quiet ones who simply counted the days. Ava treated them all with the same professional detachment and respect she'd shown everyone else. But a month into her new post, one inmate broke through her professional veneer. His name was Leo Kim, and he was an anomaly. Serving a 15-year sentence for corporate fraud, Leo navigated the brutal prison ecosystem with a quiet grace that was jarringly out of place. He was courteous to the staff, a source of help for other inmates, and never caused a disruption. Everything about him screamed that he didn't belong in a place like this. Leo, a well-educated man in his early 30s, had been a senior accountant for a major pharmaceutical corporation. His days were spent in the prison library, where he absorbed knowledge like a sponge. Fellow inmates revered him for his willingness to help them write letters home or make sense of legal jargon. The guards, in turn, appreciated him for being one less problem to worry about. Ava first took notice of Leo in the mess hall. Amid the chaos and cacophony, he would be tucked into a corner, engrossed in a book or his own writings. He responded to her commands with a simple, "Yes, ma'am," never crossed boundaries, never sought attention, but she saw a profound sadness in his eyes, a sorrow that seemed to transcend the mere fact of his imprisonment. As weeks turned into a month, Ava observed small, telling details. The way he would gaze out the yard windows with an expression of deep remorse, the rare moments when his composure would crack, revealing a man crushed by an invisible weight. He never received mail. He never had visitors. He was an island, completely isolated from the outside world. One evening, on her rounds, she found him sitting alone, staring at a small photograph. He tucked it away as she approached, but not before she saw the image of a family. In that instant, she understood. The burden he carried was far greater than his criminal sentence. The following day, a routine cell inspection changed everything. Hidden among Leo's meager possessions was a folder, neatly organized, containing a trove of documents related to his case. When she confronted him, his response was not what she expected. He didn't make excuses. He simply looked her in the eye and delivered a statement that would echo in her mind for weeks. He told her he was innocent, framed by his former employer, and he had one final wish, one last sliver of hope. He needed someone on the outside, someone to help him prove it. But more than that, he needed help fulfilling a sacred promise he had made to his dying daughter. Ava stood there, the weight of the folder in her hands feeling immense, knowing her next move would set in motion a chain of events that could destroy them both. The weight of Leo's words landed on Ava with the force of a physical blow. She was rooted to the floor of his cell, the folder in her hand trembling slightly. Every instinct screamed that this was a line she could not cross, a cliff from which there was no return. but the raw desperation in his voice, tempered by an unyielding dignity, held her there. He painted a heartbreaking picture of his daughter, Mia, who was just 8 when his world fell apart. She had been fighting a losing battle with leukemia, her childhood confined to sterile hospital rooms. While lawyers argued over spreadsheets and corporate policy, Mia's time was running out. During one of their last visits, he had made her a promise, his anchor in a sea of despair. He swore he would prove his innocence and come home to take her to the State Observatory to see the galaxies up close. Mia passed away 6 months into his sentence. The promise was broken. He never got to say a real goodbye. The guilt, he explained, was a poison he ingested every single day. But there was another layer. After the trial, Leo's ex-wife began receiving anonymous, threatening phone calls. It was a clear warning to stay quiet. Leo was convinced his former company was tying up loose ends. Ava found herself probing for details, against her better judgment. Why didn't his lawyer chase these leads? Why was this evidence never presented? Leo described a legal steamroller, powerful corporate attorneys who crushed an overwhelmed public defender, and key witnesses who either recanted their testimony or vanished into thin air. Sleep eluded Ava that night. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. Leo's story, the mysterious folder, a little girl who died dreaming of the stars. She tried to dismiss it as someone else's tragedy, a problem she couldn't afford to make her own. But the image of Leo's face, etched with the pain of a father's broken promise, was seared into her mind. The next morning, Ava made a choice that violated every tenet of her training. On her lunch break, she drove to a public library and began pulling the threads of Leo Kim's case. What she unearthed in court records and news archives was deeply unsettling. The trial had been suspiciously fast. Key witnesses had changed their stories after the verdict. The pharmaceutical company had a history of safety violation investigations that were consistently and mysteriously dropped. Ava became obsessed, dedicating her off days to this shadow investigation. She connected with journalists who covered corporate malfeasance and spoke to disgruntled former employees. Slowly, a pattern of deep-seated corruption began to emerge, one far more sinister than simple embezzlement. The more she uncovered, the more she believed Leo was telling the truth. But believing was one thing, acting was another. Ava was acutely aware that if she took the next step, she wasn't just risking her job, she was risking her freedom. If this was all an elaborate con, her life would be over. But if it was true, a good man was rotting in a cage while the real villains walked free. The dam of secrecy finally broke 3 months later. A former CFO of the company, terminally ill and seeking absolution, reached out to a reporter. He had the smoking gun. Financial records, incriminating emails, and secret recordings that laid the entire conspiracy bare. Leo had been the designated scapegoat. The CFO admitted he had been blackmailed into falsifying the very documents that convicted Leo. This was Ava's moment of truth. She could hand the evidence over through proper channels and watch it get buried in red tape for years. Or she could take a more direct, far more dangerous path. She could become an instrument of justice, operating outside the very system she had sworn to uphold. She chose the harder path. Working as a silent partner to the journalist and the dying executive, Ava orchestrated a media bombshell. The evidence was released to multiple news outlets at the exact same time. From inside the prison, she worked to build a counter-narrative, gathering official documentation of Leo's perfect behavior and collecting character statements from inmates. She constructed a case for his innocence that the world could not ignore. The story exploded on a Tuesday morning. By nightfall, Leo Kim's face was on every news channel in Texas. The executives who framed him were in handcuffs. The corrupt officials who protected them were under federal investigation. And Leo Kim, after 3 years of suffocating despair, could finally breathe again. But Ava's fingerprints were all over the operation, and they didn't go unseen. An internal affairs investigation was launched to find the source of the leak. Ava knew her time was running out. The night before his conviction was formally vacated, Leo requested to see her. They met in the quiet solitude of the prison chapel. He thanked her, his voice thick with emotion, and then he made another request, one that would require a different kind of courage. He asked her to help him keep his promise to Mia. Not the old promise, but a new one, born from the ashes of the old. He envisioned a foundation in Mia's name, dedicated to helping children with cancer, whose families were also caught in the gears of the legal system. He needed a partner he could trust, someone to help him build a legacy of hope from the ruins of his life. Ava looked at the man before her, a man who had been stripped of everything, yet whose first instinct was to give back. And she realized this was never just about justice. It was about redemption. It was about turning pain into purpose. It was about honoring a little girl who never got to see the stars. When Leo walked out of prison, a free man the following week, Ava knew her own journey was just getting started. 3 days after Leo walked free, Ava stood at her apartment window as the sunrise bled across the Texas sky. Her phone had been a constant buzz of ignored calls from prison administration, IA investigators, and reporters. She let them all go to voicemail. Her priorities had shifted. Her career no longer seemed as important as the new path unfolding before her. Leo had called the previous night. His voice, unshackled from the acoustics of prison, sounded lighter, yet it still carried the echoes of his ordeal. He had found a modest apartment and was taking the first tentative steps back into the world. But he wasn't focused on himself. He was focused on the foundation. He needed her. Ava had spent her life working within the system, placing her faith in its structures. Leo's ordeal had been a harsh lesson. Sometimes the system breaks, and when it does, it's up to individuals to bridge the gap. That morning, she made a decision that torched the bridges to her old life. She typed up her resignation. Her supervisor, Warden Evans, a decent man who ran a tight ship, summoned her to his office. She saw the disappointment in his eyes as he read her letter. He set it down, looking at her directly. He knew, he said, the investigation had pointed to her. But then he said something that stunned her. In his 30 years, he confessed, he had rarely seen an officer act with such profound integrity. He couldn't officially endorse her methods, but he understood the heart behind them. Ava left that meeting feeling a strange cocktail of terror and liberation. She was abandoning a steady paycheck and a future she had fought for. But she was walking toward a purpose that felt more valuable than any security. She met Leo at a downtown coffee shop the next week. Seeing him in civilian clothes without barriers between them was surreal. He looked older than his years, but a new resolve had settled in his posture. It was hope. They spent hours mapping out the foundation. Leo had already initiated contact with hospitals and cancer research centers. He'd consulted with lawyers about the nonprofit process, but he needed her specific expertise. He needed someone who understood the labyrinth of the legal and social services systems, someone who could be a fierce advocate for families who felt lost and powerless. Ava heard herself agree before her logical mind could object. Perhaps it was the light in Leo's eyes as he spoke of shielding other families from the nightmare he and Mia had endured. Perhaps it was the realization that this was the purest form of justice she could ever hope to serve. The next 3 months were a blur of creation. Ava burned through her savings to stay afloat while they tackled the mountain of paperwork for nonprofit status and reached out to potential donors. Leo attacked the work with a ferocious intensity, fueled by years of pent-up grief and purpose. He worked until the early hours of the morning, researching grants, writing proposals, and building a network of allies. Ava worried he was using the work to outrun his trauma, but she also knew that a powerful purpose could be a powerful medicine. The idea that his daughter's memory would become a force for good seemed to sustain him. The Mia Kim Foundation officially launched 6 months after Leo's release. Their first case came almost immediately, a referral from a social worker. A single mother, Maria Santos, was on the brink of financial ruin while trying to cover her son's cancer treatments. Her ex-husband's recent arrest had left her to face the storm alone, buried under medical bills and legal forms. Ava drove to Maria's apartment that Saturday, armed with groceries and a binder of resources. She sat at the kitchen table, helping Maria make sense of the chaos, while her 8-year-old son, Carlos, played on a tablet nearby. The boy was frail from chemotherapy, but his smile was a powerful echo of the photos Ava had seen of Mia. That evening, she recounted the visit to Leo. She could hear the emotion choke his voice as she described Carlos, how he proudly showed her his drawings and talked about becoming a doctor to help other sick kids. When she finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then Leo said something that crystallized the true meaning of their mission. For the first time since Mia's death, he felt he was finally keeping his promise to her. Not the original one, but a deeper one, to ensure no other child would have to face their battle alone. In the year that followed, the Foundation's impact exploded beyond their wildest dreams. They became a lifeline for dozens of families caught at the brutal intersection of medical and legal crises, providing financial aid, connecting them with pro bono lawyers, and fostering support groups. Ava had found her true calling. Her law enforcement background gave her an edge, allowing her to cut through bureaucratic red tape and advocate for families with ruthless efficiency. Her innate empathy allowed her to connect with parents on a human level, earning their trust in their most desperate hours. She was working harder than ever, but for the first time, she felt truly fulfilled. Leo, too, had undergone a profound metamorphosis. The broken man from the prison chapel had become a passionate and eloquent advocate, capable of commanding the respect of both corporate boards and medical professionals. He testified before state legislatures, spoke at conferences on criminal justice reform, and became a powerful voice for second chances. But it was the small victories that resonated the most. A call from a mother whose son was in remission, a graduation photo from a teenager who had beaten cancer, a simple thank you note from a family who said the Foundation had been their only reason to hold on to hope. One evening, almost 2 years to the day after Leo's release, he called Ava, his voice buzzing with an excitement she'd never heard before. He had just secured a partnership with a major pharmaceutical company to provide free medication to children from low-income families. As Ava listened, she had a moment of profound clarity. They had taken the ugliest chapters of their lives, his wrongful conviction, her professional exile, and spun them into a force for good. The promise made to a little girl who never saw the stars was now helping countless other children navigate their own darkness. And the cop who broke the rules had discovered that the highest laws aren't written in books, but in the human heart. But their story was far from over. Ava could sense that Leo was aiming for something even bigger, a new challenge that would test them both in ways they couldn't yet fathom. That something bigger arrived with the force of a freight train. 3 months later, a call from a former colleague, Detective Rodriguez, would test the very foundations of what they had built. His voice was grim as he laid out the situation. A sweeping federal investigation had unearthed a sprawling criminal conspiracy radiating from the same company that had framed Leo. They were now facing charges for a years-long cover-up of safety violations that had led to severe illnesses and deaths. The investigation revealed their playbook, targeting whistleblowers, destroying evidence, and using their army of lawyers to silence anyone who got in their way. But the case was hitting a wall. Key witnesses had either disappeared or were too terrified to testify. The prosecutors needed a linchpin, someone who understood the company's corrupt inner workings from the inside, someone with a proven history of courage. They needed Leo to testify. Ava heard the familiar tremor of fear in Leo's voice when she relayed the request. These were the people who had stolen 3 years of his life, the people responsible for the darkness that surrounded his daughter's final months. Now the government was asking him to step back into the line of fire. The stakes were immense. Testifying would mean neglecting the foundation at a crucial time. It would mean reopening old wounds, facing a brutal cross-examination designed to destroy his character, and risking the new life he had so painstakingly built. But it also offered a chance to stop these people from creating more victims, more families like his own. Ava found herself back in that familiar, agonizing space between the safe choice and the right one. She could advise him to protect what they had built, to focus on the foundation and sidestep this new battle. Or she could encourage him to take on a fight that was bigger than them, a fight to dismantle a system of corruption that had ruined countless lives. They convened at the quiet park that had become Leo's sanctuary, the same place he had said his final goodbye to Mia. As they sat on a bench, watching children play, Ava saw the internal war raging within him. His hands trembled slightly, a telltale sign of his resurfacing trauma. He confessed that the nightmares had returned. He spoke of the sleepless nights haunted by the memory of being powerless, of being an insect under the heel of a corporate giant. He talked about the suffocating guilt he still carried about Mia, wondering if a different choice, a different strategy, could have changed her fate. Then a shift occurred in Leo's voice. The tremor of fear was replaced by a spine of steel. He told Ava about a recent conversation with Maria Santos. Her son Carlos was in remission and thriving. Maria had thanked him, but then she said something that had struck him to his core. She said the foundation's real gift wasn't the money, it was hope. Hope that good people were still willing to fight for the little guy. Leo looked at Ava, and in his eyes she saw the true measure of the man he had become. He said Mia would have wanted him to fight, not just for other sick children, but for every family facing an enemy too powerful to defeat alone. Testifying wasn't about revenge for his own past, it was about protecting the future for others. Ava felt it again, the same undeniable certainty she had felt in his prison cell years ago. The recognition that some moments are defining and backing down is a luxury you can't afford when the stakes are this high. She told him she would support him no matter what, but she offered her own perspective. She had seen too many powerful people escape accountability. She had watched too many families be crushed by the very systems meant to protect them. His testimony could be the key that breaks the entire corrupt machine. And more importantly, she reminded him, he wasn't the same man they had railroaded years ago. he wasn't alone. He now had allies, a platform, and a credibility that made him infinitely more formidable. Leo agreed to testify. The months that followed were a grueling marathon. Ava became his strategist, his shield, and his emotional anchor. She liaised with federal prosecutors, helped him prepare for the brutal cross-examination, and coordinated with security experts to protect him. All the while, she kept the foundation running, empowering her team to carry the mission forward. The trial was a spectacle, drawing national media attention. Day after day, Leo took the stand and calmly, methodically, exposed a corporate culture that valued profits over lives. He detailed buried safety reports, employees fired for speaking up, and a concerted effort to hide the truth. When the defense attorneys tried to paint him as a vengeful ex-employee, Leo simply pointed to his foundation's work. He asked the jury why a man motivated by revenge would dedicate his life to helping sick children. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The jury returned in under 6 hours. Guilty verdicts on all charges. The executives received lengthy prison sentences. The company was hit with crippling financial penalties that would fund victim compensation for years. But for Ava, the true victory unfolded in the weeks after the verdict. Calls poured in from other whistleblowers, inspired by Leo's courage. Letters arrived from families who had lost loved ones, thanking them for proving that one person could still make a difference. Invitations came from other nonprofits wanting to partner and expand their work. 6 months after the verdict, Ava stood in the foundation's office, looking at the wall of photos, a mosaic of smiling children and grateful parents. In the center was the photo of Mia Kim, the little girl who never saw the stars, but whose legacy had sparked a constellation of hope. Leo came and stood beside her. The last vestiges of fear were gone from his eyes, replaced by the quiet confidence of a man who has found his purpose. He started talking about the future, about expanding the foundation, about establishing new chapters, developing new programs. Ava smiled. It was the same fire, the same passion she had heard in his voice when he first described his dream. But now that dream was backed by a proven track record and the resources to aim even higher. As they stood there, planning what came next, Ava reflected on the incredible chain of events that had brought them to this point. She had started as a cop, became a corrections officer, and finally found her true calling as an advocate, fighting for people outside the traditional systems. Leo's simple wish, to clear his name and honor his daughter, had set off a profound chain reaction, forcing Ava to risk everything and discover a strength she never knew she possessed. The foundation was a success, but their work was not done. The calls for help still came every day, a constant reminder that their mission had grown far beyond one man's original wish. Dear viewers, sometimes fulfilling one person's last wish is just the first chapter in a story that changes countless lives. Ava Ramirez thought she was simply helping an innocent man. Instead, she learned that true justice isn't always found in a rulebook. Sometimes it demands that we step outside our designated roles, take monumental risks, and fight for what's right, no matter how impossible the odds. Leo Kim's last wish was never just about proving his innocence. It was about transmuting pain into purpose, turning personal tragedy into a catalyst for change, and ensuring that a little girl's dream of seeing the stars would live on, lighting the way for others lost in the dark. Their story reminds us that the most powerful promises are not always made to the living. Sometimes they are made to a memory, to a principle, and to a future we hope to build for those who come after us.